Living my bucolic life, free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So today's project is going to be kind of fun. It is going to be a trench coat, yes. Now first, when I was looking for a pattern, I was looking for a lined pattern. I did not find one, and I've been going back and forth in my mind if I'm going to line it or not. And I've decided I'm not going to. I have other jacket videos in my collection that have a lined jacket, so maybe if you really want something with lining, you can look back at some of those. But this is going to be it. And I chose it. It says easy to sew because it's going to be big, and I want it to be easy, you know? So the fabric I'm going to be using is actually a home deck fabric, and traditionally, yes, a trench coat is a neutral color like a tan or camel or khaki or something. But me, you know, being me, I am using this. This is one of those 100% polyester solarium home deck fabrics. And I think that that's going to work great for a trench because, you know, it's an all-weather kind of material. Hopefully it's somewhat repellent, you know, but it's got enough body to it. I think it's going to work really well. So the version I'm going to be doing is kind of a hybrid of a couple different views. I want the long trench coat like this, but I like this cuff. It's like it's got little carriers and a little tie that goes through them to cinch up the arms, you know. I like that. And yeah, a tie belt. I don't really see any buttons or anything. Just, you know, loop it over, tie the belt. I think it's going to be cute. So hopefully it won't be too much trouble. Now, usually I would use a size 16, but because it's a trench, and oversized trenches are a lot more fun than ones that are too snug. And this pattern does give you a lot of ease. Okay, so like for say the size 16, which is made for a 38-inch bust, the finished bust is 48.5. So they're already giving you at least 10 inches of ease around your chest, okay? I'm actually going to bump it up one size just because I can. And you can see on their diagrams and on their photo, I don't know if you can see or not, but the shoulder seam, it is dropped a bit, kind of like this one. Okay, see how this shoulder seam is here? It's intentional. It's a slouchy kind of shoulder. And that's fine. That's really fine. So that's what I'm going to do. Let me go ahead, turn the camera off, cut out my pattern pieces. I'll let you know what I find out. I just opened up my piece here, my direction sheet, and I got to looking at it, and there's another difference here that I didn't notice before. Okay, so on these two jackets, you can see it has this extra little overlay flap area here. This one does not. I'm thinking I'm going to do that. So basically, my view, my coat is going to be this pattern, but full length, and instead of patch pockets, going to do inseam pockets on the sides, okay? So basically, I'm going to be grabbing all of the pieces for view C, plus the little extra inseam pocket here instead of this one. Who knows? Maybe I'll do both if I have extra fabric. You never know. All right, I've got all my pattern pieces cut out, but before I cut out my fabric, I want to make sure I get the length right. So I want my finished length to hit like right at the back of my knee, okay? And so I need to see where this is going to be. So if I take their longest length, which is view A for the size 18 that I'm cutting out, they say 48 inches is from the base of the neck in the back to the finished edge. So what I'm going to do is put my little clothespin at 48 inches, hold this up to the back of my neck and see where it falls when I'm looking in the mirror, and then I can see how many inches I need to shorten it. All right, so I need to make my finished length 43 inches, and the pattern has a finished length of 48. I need to shorten 5 inches from my overall length. So there are 3 pieces that I'm going to need to adjust. I have a front piece, a back piece, and a front facing piece. They do have a couple different adjustment lines. First of all, if you're petite, okay, so you're shorter in stature, especially in your torso region, this is the adjustment here that they're going to have you shorten it up by 1 inch, okay? And that's going to move your whole belt loops and everything up a bit. I'm going to leave that, and since this is fairly flat across the bottom, I am just going to measure up 5 inches. And I need to iron my pattern piece so that it will lay flat first, but I'm just going to measure up 5 inches from the bottom all the way across, make little marks, and then just trim it off on all 3 pieces. My front piece, my front facing piece, and my back piece. But like I said, first I'm going to go iron these with a dry iron just to get all the creases out. Okay, so we are down to the sleeve here, and what I wanted to show you is it's a fairly straight sleeve. For the size 18 that I cut out, it's going to give me a little over a 16-inch sleeve, which, you know, I want to make sure for a jacket, especially one that's supposed to be big and loose, that if I have a bulky sweater or something on underneath it, I have plenty of room here to put my arm through. So even though with 16 plus inches, yes, I can put my arm, and even with like this blouse flannel top, I can get it in there. But I think I want a little more space. I want at least, I would say, oh my goodness, at least 3 inches of ease, just to make sure I have plenty of room to move my arms around, you know? And so if I'm just going to measure over my sleeve, my big bulky sleeve here, very loosely, I'm not cinching it in at all, to get over all of the layers of sleeve and stuff I have is 14.5. So if I want at least 3 inches of ease, that's 15.5, 16, 17.5 inches finished with, okay? So then I need to add 1.25 inches for seam allowance, which is going to give me a cut width of almost 19 inches. So if I measure straight across here, I'm going to need to add 1.5 inches. You can't see that, but trust me, I'm going to need to add 1.5 inches in width. And you can kind of see it comes out like this, and then it actually goes in a little bit, you know, like that. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. So I'm debating on how I am going to do this, and because I want to end up with my bottom width the same, okay, because it's already going to be cinched in, and if I make it even wider, it's going to be super cinchy. So I think I'm just going to do the typical, you know, slice it, spread it, bicep enhancement kind of thing here. So I'm going to need to make some adjustments, and the first thing I'm going to do is line up these dots up here at the top on one of the lines of my grid underneath here, and make sure that my straight of grain is also going parallel with my grid, because that's how I'm going to make sure that I get my line straight here. And come up here, put my ruler on those dots, on that line, and draw all the way down. Okay, I'm going to make a big cross, and right over here where there's, no, you can't see that. Okay, there's little dots here and here for my size, okay, the 18 inches. It should be 5/8 of an inch down from the cut edge, okay? I'm going to draw a line just connecting those 2 dots on each side. So I have a cross going this way and this way. And now I'm going to cut from the bottom down here. And I'm not really worrying too much about length because we're going to have that tie and everything, and you know, that's going to be fine. If you really need to shorten or lengthen your sleeve, this is the spot. And I would, if you're going to shorten or lengthen it, I would actually do that before you start blowing out and everything for your bicep if you need to. Just throwing that out there. Okay, so I'm going to cut up to the dot for my size up here. And then over here, cutting out to the dot for my size. Right there, and the same thing over here. All right, so I've got everything cut. I've got a piece of tissue paper here that I'm just going to use to tape to. So I'm going to get my tissue paper scrap kind of centered over a spot here and line up these dots up here at the top where I sliced up to, kind of in the center there, and I want those to be on one of my grid pieces. And I'm just going to stick a little weight up there just to hold it in place. Now, out here, remember I need to spread this open. Everything's going to want to move. Let me stick another weight on my tissue paper down here. Okay, so I need to open this up. If this, I don't know, can you see that line? You know what, let me go ahead and draw the line on my tissue paper so that you can see it better, because I can see it, but it's a little tricky right here. Okay, can you see this line here? Actually, I'm going to flip it around because it's bigger up here. All right, this is the line I'm going to be basing my adjustment to. So I'm going to line up this top dot here with the top of my line, if you can see that. And I need to have these 2 points spread out so they're 1.5 inches apart. Okay, so if I divide that up, that's 3/4 of an inch on each side. So let me just stick this here for a second. Get my little ruler here, and I'm just going to make a little hash mark at 3/4 of an inch on each side. Hope you can see that right here and here so I can get those matched up. All right. So now I'm going to bring this side, so the tip of it is in line with that 3/4 inch position. And on this side, the same thing, so that this tip down here is 3/4 of an inch from that line, okay? Put that weight there. Now, I need to overlap the bottom there, overlap the bottom here. Now, it's way too overlapped right now, but it's going to give me a place to start. So, just trying to get everything out of the way here and smooth it, and I want to line up so that my bottom edges of my pattern are meeting at this line, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of tape right here. All right, close enough. Now, it's these top ones that are keeping it spread the right distance here. And so this is going to change the shape of my sleeve cap. It's going to flatten it out a little bit, but the overall dimensions of it should be the same, you know, and it is a loose fitting, it is a loose fitting jacket, so we should be good here. Okay, just double checking I got everything lining up at the right spot. Put a piece of tape up here at the top. And another one midway here. Okay, I think that's about good. So now I have my new sleeve pattern here that's going to be plenty wide for what I need. Just even that out at the bottom up there. And up here at the top, just trim off the excess. But all of the other dots and notches and everything are going to stay the same. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I can tell you from when I was cutting this out that it frays like crazy. So I am going to be serging around every piece before I start messing with it. But what I'm going to be working on first is my piece number 1. It's my front piece. And there is darts, there is belt placement, there's a dot up here for collar placement, lots of things to mark. So let me get my hole punch and we'll get started. So the way that I'm going to mark all of my little circles is I have a dark blue heat erasable pen and a big thick piece of leather. This is a coaster from past adventures, and I'm going to punch out the circle that goes along with the size that I cut out, which is 18, with my leather screw type hole punch. And what that does is it just cuts a little hole that then I can just draw straight through to mark my dot. Okay, so that's how I'm going to be punching out to mark all of these circles. For the notches, I am just going to come in and clip them like so. Okay, so let me get all of that done. I am marking on the wrong side of my fabric and I'll be right back. Okay, I want to show you down here, there's kind of a confusion of dots. And what it is this says view C, this says view C. The big dots are the placement for the squared pocket. And what I did is I cut out both the squared pocket and the inseam pocket, because you can't have too many pockets on a coat, you know? So if you're going to do view C, which I kind of am, which has the big square pocket in the front, I need to punch out this dot and this dot, okay? But for the belt loop, let me get my little picture here. Okay, so that's the squared pocket, but then there's a belt loop here. The belt loop is the smaller circle, so it's this circle and this circle. All right, so that's what all this is doing. Okay, and just so that my lines are easy for me to see, I'm going to go ahead and connect the dots up here for my dart. Okay, because that's a lot easier to see than trying to find the little dots. And I'm also going to draw a line straight across where the pocket is going to be here. So here's a dot, we cannot see. Okay, so here's a dot and here's a dot. Those two are going to get connected this way, and that's going to help me more easily find them for my pocket placement, okay? These two dots right here, I'm also going to draw a line between so that I can find them easier. That is a belt loop. And this dot down here, because it just wants to disappear, I'm just going to draw a big bullseye around. That's part of my side pocket placement. Okay, so with all of this drawn on here, I should go ahead and put my dart in first before I serge it. So give me a second to mark the other side and then we'll make this dart. Okay, so to make my dart, I'm going to stick my pin down one dot up here and let it come back up on the second dot. Now at the top here where it's cut, we've got little angles that are going to help us make sure that we have it angled right. So before I actually pinch and pin everything down here, I'm going to use the cut edge to kind of figure out my angles. I want these two cut edges to line up there, okay? So I'm going to put a pin here to lock that in place. This is still sticking out that dot on this side, and then I'm going to come down and pinch it at this bottom dot, okay? And stick a pin down here, and I'm going to put one midway too. Alrighty. So to stitch it, starting up here, following it all the way down to the end. I'm not going to be back stitching, and I'll show you why in a minute, but you can feel free to if you would like. When we're done, we're going to press this whole stitched dart towards the front area here. So let me go over and introduce you to today's machine. Okay, so I am going to be using Rosie today. I have been working on her for quite a while. She's a 1945 industrial singer that I remade in the whole Rosie the Riveter type of motif. If I can bring my camera over here. She's fabulous. But one of the things about her is she does not have a back stitch, so I'm going to be treating it like I do with my treadles without a back stitch, where I just kind of create one by hand by moving my fabric. But with her, at the end of the dart, that might be a headache, so I'm just going to go straight off the edge and then tie it. Alrighty, so I have actually two different colored threads on here because I'm using a very colorful fabric and did not feel like winding a new bobbin at this point. So she does have the little knee lifter for the presser bar, and I'm going to set my little liver here and get her started. Now, the backup that I was telling you about, what that's going to be is I get her to the point where her needle is up, move the fabric forward a bit, set her back down, and then keep going. So. And then when I get to the end of my dart, which I can clearly see is right here, I'm just going to go straight off the edge. Okay, so then we're just going to call it good. I need to get used to using my knee to lift that lever. I always want to reach back there and lift it up with my hand. You know, habits die hard. Okay, so now that I have that stitched, I need to press it so that this dart is folding towards the lapel area over here. Hello and welcome to another day. It's actually been a couple since I worked on this, but it's a rainy day outside, so it's a good time to jump back into it. So the view that I'm doing has that little overlay part in the front, so that's what is up next. You do cut 4 of these out. I initially only cut 2 and had to go back and cut a couple more, you know, as you do. But what we need to do is, for each pair with them right sides together at 5/8 of an inch, come right here and sew all the way here, okay, because we're going to flip them right side out. So let me go ahead and get that done before I actually do any marking or serging. Okay, so I have this stitching line in, and to turn it right side out, before I do that, I need to clip around here. And on the instructions, I think they actually do show taking a notch. So what I was going to say is I'm going to clip up to about 1/8 of an inch away from the stitching line here, but instead of just slashing it, I'm actually going to take little notches out, and that should help, you know, take out some of the bulk when it's turned right side out. Take a big notch out there just for funsies. Okay, so let me go ahead and do this to the other side. I am going to be understitching this, so once that is notched out there, I can flip it right side out. And the reason that I notched it is, you know, all of that seam allowance is going to compress into a smaller area in here, so there'll be less to overlap. But you know what would be even better is if I just made that a little less bulky all the way around. So I'm going to come back and take out about half of that seam allowance, at least right here in this curve. Okay, and then blend it back up here. All right, so I still have my little notches there. Stuff out of the way. And flip it right side out. Okay, now you want to do both of your pieces here and figure out what's the best looking one that's going to be your visible side, because for each one of these you're going to need to have one for each side, you know. One is the outside, one is the facing. Once you have that figured out, then we're going to understitch the facing. But let me go ahead and get this one flipped first. Okay, so I have my 2 front pieces here. And just to be super, super safe that I'm going to be understitching them correctly, I'm going to actually pin the seam allowance. And let me show you what I mean. For understitching, you want the right side, the side that is visible, not to have any stitching on it, okay? So like on this one, this is going to be my visible side, this is going to be my facing side. So I'm going to push the seam allowance towards the facing side just to make sure that I don't end up with two on the same side. I'm going to go ahead and pin that seam allowance over, okay? So when you stitch it, you're going to be, get my pen here, you're going to be stitching it on the facing side, just, you know, barely inside here, so there's that seam just in here, about 1/16 of an inch or so, okay? And you're going to come all the way down, going through the seam allowances, you know, both seam allowances and the facing, as far as you can get in this corner. You're probably not going to be able to get all the way. I'm probably going to have to stop, you know, about an inch or so above it. Then I start over again on this side and come all the way down, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pin. Let's see here, just to make sure I'm doing the right thing here. This seam allowance is going towards the back. Pin this seam allowance the same, going towards the back so that I don't get that messed up. And go ahead and put my understitching in. Okay, so I wanted to show you, I'm coming down the one way, my corner is right here. Okay, so I'm looking at my right side, making sure my seam allowances are over here. And the closest that I can get is, I'm almost there. I can feel it starting to get kind of tight. And I don't really have to go as far as I can. I'm going to go where I can comfortably stop. You know, you just don't want to put too much pressure on yourself. So I'm going to put a little back stitch there, lift up my presser foot and move over around the corner. So I'm just opening up that corner there and getting set up on the other side of the corner where I can comfortably call it good. Okay, and then I'm just going to start her up again. And I am just using, like on my presser foot, there's the open toe, and I use the inside of the open toe kind of as the seam guide. And that gives me a really nice close edge. It's probably a little bit less than a 1/16 of an inch, but it seems to work pretty well. Okay, so still getting used to using the one little knee lifter here. So here is my understitching there. So now I need to go over to my ironing board and press this. And when you press the edge, you want to make sure that you have a really nice non-visible side here. This is my right side, so that on my wrong side, I can see all of this stuff curled over in that stitching line on the wrong side, okay? Okay, so I've got it pressed, and I am going to serge the raw edges, you know, especially up here and here. This is going to be inside of a collar, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's just going to make my life a lot easier. One thing that I wanted to show you is that when you understitch, because it's curling the edge more one way than another, after you press it, let me see if I can get you closer, your edges will most likely not line up correctly anymore, okay? And that is just because the top is being curled around the back. That's fine, that's normal. So when I serge the edge, I am going to serge it based on the smaller side, okay? So I will be trimming off a little bit here, and up here at the top I will be trimming off a little bit, but I'm going to make my serging line up with this part here, okay? And I am hopeful that since their instructions called for understitching, that they assumed that that type of a little 1/8 of an inch difference would be made, you know. You can probably do either. The serging that I use, I have a 4th thread serger, but I only use 3 threads. And I do it so that I have a smaller serging width Okay, so my serging width is only 1/8 of an inch wide. So if I was to put it on this outside one, it wouldn't even catch this down here at the furthest part. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Let me go ahead and get that done, and then we'll come back and put marks on these. I wanted to wait putting marks on because I use a heat erasable pen. And if I mark it now before I iron everything, you know, especially this pressing I just did, it would just disappear anyway. Okay, so now that that is done, on the right side of my little overlays, they're calling them, there's 2 dots that I'm going to mark. These have to do with the sleeve placement, I believe. And so I want to be able to see that from the right side because it's going to be covering up the ones on my front piece. Okay, so I got those placed on there. Now I need to go get my front piece I worked on before, and we'll set these on. Okay, so here is my front piece. That's the dart that we made in it before, and I'm going to set this overlay on it, right sides together. Okay, and where are we going to stitch? All the raw edges. Okay, so do they say what's in? They just say based. Okay, well, since they are saying based, to me that means we don't want these stitches to be visible. So I will be doing it on my machine. However, I'm going to do it with a long stitch length, and I'm going to do it at a slightly smaller seam allowance, closer to 1/2 inch, okay? So starting here, up, over, all the way down and down. We want the whole outside edge to act as a single unit at this point, okay? So this is still free. The understitching is only visible on this side. I'm going to go ahead and get those stitched on to both of my fronts. Okay, so I am having some trouble with Rosie's bobbin case, so I just went on 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐞.com and ordered a couple new bobbin cases for her. They're usually pretty fast at shipping, so hopefully they'll be here soon, but I'm going to try to go ahead and finish, you know, using her with the funky little case that's giving me trouble. I need to go ahead and get my back piece out. The back piece is just a big flat piece. I do need to put stay stitching up here at the neckline, and I am going to serge all the way around that piece. So let me get that done, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I have my stay stitching done around my neck, which is basically just a straight row of stitching at about 1/2 inch seam allowance, just to keep this from wanting to stretch out of shape. And I have serged all the way around, just to keep it from fraying, because this stuff frays terribly. And now what we need to do is sew the shoulders of the fronts to the backs at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. They are not saying how to press it, but I am going to assume that we need to press these open, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so it's getting a little bit thick here, you know, using a heavier fabric with a few layers going on it. So what I'm doing so that it'll stay open nicely is, you know, pressing it first with a whole lot of steam and pressing down fairly hard. But once it's hot and saturated with steam, I'm going to pull my iron off, put my block of wood on there, and just hold it down. I want to hold it until that block kind of absorbs some of that moisture, the fabric has time to cool. Okay, so while that is sitting over there, we're going to be working on our collar next. There's 2 different pieces. One is an under collar, okay, and one is the upper collar. The under collar is slightly narrower than the upper collar, all right? So it looks like they want us to interface both of these, which is fine, that's good. Since I have fairly thick fabric already, and I'm going to be putting 2 layers of interfacing, I'm actually still going to use a lighter weight interfacing, just because 2 layers of lightweight interfacing, in my opinion, kind of makes 1 medium weight interfacing, so, you know, that works for me. And since my fabric is sturdy and stable enough, the interfacing is more to keep it from wanting to shift out of square, okay? So that is what I'm going to do. Let me go ahead and grab that. And it looks like we're going to need to put interfacing on this whole front facing piece also. So I'm going to go ahead and iron all that on at the same time. So of course I'm going to use my old faithful interfacing. Love this stuff. Again, on all three pieces, the upper collar, under collar, and the big front facing piece. All right, I've got my interfacing on everything, and there was one more piece that needs interfacing, and it was this back facing piece, so I've got that fused on too. So we're going to work on this collar here for a minute, and just to keep them straight, I went ahead and wrote, like this one says, if you can read my writing, under collar here, and on this one I wrote upper collar, just so I could keep track of them. And I'm going to mark them very much the same. I haven't marked this one yet, but basically there's a couple dots up here that I punched out, and I've got those marked. I've got some notches clipped, and then I also draw a dotted line down the center where that center back line is going to be. So let me get this one marked, and then we're going to ease them together. The one is larger than the other. They want us to ease them together, so we'll figure out a strategy for that. Okay, so getting these things marked, it's going to be a little bit tricky here. And so what I'm going to do is stick a pin through the dot on this side and back out to the dot on that side. It should be at 5/8 of an inch. Both sides there, and anchor it in. I'm also going to come down here and match up that center dotted line on both sides. Get that pinned, and remember, one of these pieces is a lot longer than the other, and we're going to have to ease them together, so that's going to be fun. The other place I'm going to be pinning together is at this corner, okay, where the corner is. I'm going to put a pin right there so we make sure that both of the curves on both corners match up here. So you see all of that. They're going to want us to ease that together, okay? So let's see, if I fold it in half so that the longer one is on the outside, that should give me a halfway point that I can stick a pin right here, okay? And it's going to make it a lot smaller to ease together. So when I sew this, I'm going to put the side that is bigger, which is going to be the upper collar, on the bottom next to the feed dogs, because the feed dogs are going to help smush all of that in. It would actually be easier to ease this together if this side did not have interfacing on it, but you know, it is what it is. I'm thankful that I only have a lightweight interfacing because that'll make my life easier. Okay, looking at the bottom here, it does look like there's a little bit of ease along the bottom too. So it's going to be the same thing, folding it in half so that the shorter side is on the inside, finding that halfway point, put a pin here, okay, and then on this section do the same thing, fold that in half, at that midpoint put another pin here, okay, and so on and so forth. They want you to do this at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Doesn't specifically say that on their instructions, but we can tell because of the distance of the dots to the outside edge, that's 5/8 of an inch, so that's the seam allowance. So there you go. So let me go ahead and try to get this sewed together here with the bigger side against the feed dogs, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, I've got that stitched, and I'm going to come back with pinking shears and take off about half of this seam allowance all the way around here. And also I need to, I'm not sure if these scissors are going to work, but come up here where this curve is and clip around it. I'm not making notches, I'm not making wedges, it's just too small and everything, but I need to clip that. Okay, so that's all clipped, and then we're going to flip this right side out. Okay, so paying attention, the under collar is the one that's a little bit shorter, okay? I'm going to flip this whole thing right side out, and we're going to need to understitch this. So the under collar is like the facing, all right? So when I understitch it, the seam allowance here needs to, go towards the under collar side, okay, like this. All right, so here's the under collar, here's the upper collar, seam allowance goes that way. So that when I'm doing my understitching, this is the under collar here. While I'm stitching it, you're not going to be able to get in the corner. You're going to probably be able to do a little bit here from about this point all the way across, and then again maybe like about this much, okay? But just be very aware which one says under collar. Make sure the seam allowance is going towards that, and then when you stitch, you're going to stitch on the under collar side. And you know what? I think that by putting a little mark there on this side right now while I'm doing this, it's going to help me make sure that I don't stitch it to the wrong side when I go over to the machine, okay? Okay, so I have it pressed now, and because the upper collar was bigger and the under collar was smaller, remember when we were understitching the other overlap piece on the front and it ended up a little bit wonky on the edges? Well, by cutting these two pieces, one larger than the other, their intention is that, I believe it's their intention, so that when you're pressing it, you have plenty of room for it to curve underneath, okay? So you can see this is my curve up here. That's my understitching and everything, so that your cut edge up here, which is the part that's going to get sewed onto the jacket, is at the same level, okay? So right now, just to make everything, you know, kind of cool, I am going to go ahead and pin it, and I need to remark where those dots are right here. Those are the ones that mark where the shoulder placement is. Now, I'm going to be marking this on the right side of my collar. This dot here on the edge, that's going to be where the fold line is right now, or thereabouts. Actually, you know what? Since I'm not too sure, I'm just going to fold this in half, put a pin where the center back fold is right here, and that's going to help me line this up, because there's so much easing and going underneath and everything. All right, so there it is. I think that that's going to be visible on this side, and this should be visible on this side right here. And now I need to go get my jacket so we can get this placed on. Actually, before I grab my jacket piece, I am going to run a row of straight stitching down to the edge here at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across. It'll hold it together, plus I'll be able to shape it a little bit better, being able to clip up to that thread. Okay, got my jacket over here. I did not have this little circle here marked, so I'm going to need to get that marked really quickly. I'm just using the facing piece because it has the same mark as the main piece here. And I'm going to need this little circle for placing my collar. Okay. So move that out of the way there. And get my collar piece. All right, let's just go ahead and get started placing it on here. What I need to do, though, is everywhere that there's a curve on this neckline, I need to make some clips so that it's going to flex easier. Well, these will work. I'm just going to come in here. Remember, we've got our stay stitching. I don't want to clip up to it. Oh, that does not work. Let me get another pair of scissors. I'm going through several layers of fabric here. If the serrated marks can't do it, I don't know what I'm going to do here. Okay. This is tough stuff. All right, I am just going to have to be careful and cut it this way. I need to clip up to about 1/8 of an inch away from that stay stitching line that I put on there earlier. Okay. Just trying to be very careful here. Ooh, the back is just a single layer. All right, I can do a single layer with these. All the way around, and then that's going to help my neckline be able to flex open like this, which will help the collar get on easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is match up my shoulder seam. So where this dot is here, stick a pin through there and through the shoulder seam at about 5/8, 7 inch in. Okay, and get that placed, lock it in. I'm going to do the same thing over here, stick a pin through this dot, and then put that same pin in about 5/8, 7 inch up on the shoulder seam. Okay, right there. Oh, so stiff. Okay, lock that in. And because we clipped it, I should be able to make this back neckline flex enough that I can lay nice and flat up against my collar here. And just put some more pins across here. Okay, now let's look at the front. This dot that I put here should just barely be exposed outside the collar, okay? Because that dot was at the seam line and the seam line is slightly tucked under, all right? So I'm just gonna pin that right here. And then open up this neckline. Again, it is clipped, so it can flex up like that and have the raw edges matching together. All right, and I'll need to do the same thing for the other side of the collar. Once that is done, I need to stitch this entire collar here at 5/8, 7 inch. Okay, I'm starting at this point right here and going all the way straight down to the other side down here once it's pinned on. So I haven't stitched it yet, and I just looked at the instructions, and they don't actually want you to do your final stitch. They want you to baste. So I'm using my machine because hand basting this is not an option. But what I'm going to do is to stitch it kind of over where my stay stitching row is, which is at 1/2 inch seam allowance. They don't want you to do your final 5/8, 7 inch seam allowance now because there's going to be one more row of stitching. And if I do that now, I think that the fear is that row of stitching might be exposed. So that's fine. So instead of 5/8, 7 inch, basically, long story short, I'm going to use 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. Okay, so I've got that stitched on. Like I said, I'm having trouble with my bobbin case, and it's making my tension a bit inconsistent, but there's not too much I can do with that right now. The new cases have been ordered through Laylock, and hopefully they will be delivered soon. So I'm just going to set that aside. I need to get my facing put together. So this is my back facing. At this point, I haven't serged around anything or finished anything off. And I'm going to put it here and connect my front facing pieces to both sides so it's straight across here at 5/8, 7 inch, and then press that seam allowance open on both sides. All right, so I've got that done, and while I'm over here, I just press these open. I'm going to be finishing off the outside edge of my facing by just barely turning it in and then edge stitching it. Okay, just with a straight stitch. And I'm not pressing that under ahead of time, just as I sit at my machine. I'm just going to kind of turn it in as I go. But up here where all of this is, just because this is thick and I don't want any extra issues, I'm just going to go ahead and clip out most of that seam allowance up here. So it's going to turn up nicely. Okay, so it's kind of like that. I left about 1/8 of an inch next to the seam allowance. Okay, so I'm over here on Rosie, about to come around the back side of the back facing, and I wanted to show you because you're going to be needing to work in a lot of ease. Use a tool, don't get your fingers under there. So basically, I'm just folding it in about 1/4 inch or so, and put my little awl down and let it work that ease in. So here you can see there's a big bump right there. I'm just going to hold it down with my awl. It is going to make a little bit of a fold, but that's okay, it's going to be underneath. And Rosie's a powerful girl, so I don't want to get my fingers anywhere near that needle underneath there. I have her dialed way down. I have her dialed actually down to one of her slowest possible settings. She can do up to 6,000 stitches a minute, but we just don't need that kind of stuff going on right now. Okay, so anyway, use something sharp, work it in, save your fingers. Okay, so it is time to sew or get our facing matched up to the jacket, all right? So what I have done is around the neckline of the facing, I have made little clips, only about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch deep at the most. You really, really, really want to make sure you don't clip more than 1/2 of an inch deep, because then, you know, it gets to where it might be visible. And I am going to start up here with this corner. The collar is sandwiched in between the outside piece here and the facing, all right? But you want to make sure you have those clips in, because that's going to make it a lot easier to match up your facing on the jacket. So I am using clips. I don't know if you can see, you have so many layers, especially at this front shoulder area where you have so many layers. I don't even know how, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 15 layers of fabric right there. Lots of layers. I'm glad I'm using Rosie. So I'm using clips instead of pins to put it together at this point. So once I have it all matched up, I am going to stitch the entire thing at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, you know, starting way down here in the front, coming all the way up around the collar here, and then down this side, all at 5/8 of an inch. And let me get that done and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got it stitched all the way around, and what we need to do is understitch just this back facing area. So here's a shoulder seam, here's a shoulder seam, this is the collar up here. All right, you're gonna put all of the seam allowance, and actually I am gonna try to clip this a little bit more so it's gonna flex a little more as I am understitching, but you can see it's quite dense here. Okay, I think that's better. So all of this big ol' honkin' seam allowance is going to go right underneath the facing, and the understitching is going to be on the facing side, you know, right about here, just from this shoulder seam to this shoulder seam. Okay, so there's my understitching there. What I need to do before I turn this facing, I need to clip up to this curve, but I want to take a lot of the bulk out of that extra seam allowance, so I'm just gonna again pink about half of it off, you know, for a couple inches around that curve. And then if I can get my scissors off the magnet there, just make a few little clips coming within about 1/16 of an inch of the stitching line. So then I should be able to flip this right side out, okay? So let me do that to the other side and then go over to the ironing board and press the entire facing, being very careful, especially up here, that everything's gonna lay nice and flat. I can show you that what works for me is to press this basically kind of open, either pressing both seam allowances towards the facing or even just pressing it straight open first. This is that long front edge, okay, before I try to fold it in half. It's going to really help to get a cleaner fold on the outside, okay? So now that that's folded or pressed open there, when I go to fold this, excuse me, it's a lot easier just to go ahead and push it so everything lines up on the edge, and go ahead and give that a nice press. And I think that this is going to be my last step of the night. It's getting pretty late. What is it? It's It's 8 o'clock at night, you know. It's so dark outside, it feels like midnight, but you know, this shall pass. So let me get this part done and I will see you in the morning. I spoke too soon. I want to show you one other thing. When I get to this point where my shoulder seams are, I am just pinning my facing so it's in line here, the shoulder seam of my facing with my jacket. And I'm just going to come back by hand and just tack it to the seam allowances here like that, just so it stays nice and neat right down there. All right, one more thing. This is really, really thick underneath here. Lots of stuff going on there. And I just want it to lay a lot smoother. So I'm going to come in here and grate a bunch of this stuff out. Just in this area where this seam is here. So I'm going to take my first layer here down probably to about a fat 1/8 of an inch. The next layers right here, I'm going to take a couple of those, cut them a little bit longer. The idea is that if I stagger all these, it won't be such a hump. And then at the very end, I've got all of this stuff, and what I'm going to do is just clip out this entire seam allowance here. I'm leaving, you know, just a hair next to the stitching line, but just to get all of that bulk out there also, just to try to make it so that there's not such a hump right there. And that's better, that's better. It's still thick, but it's a lot better than it was. So then I can match up this shoulder seam of my facing to the shoulder seam of my jacket. Make sure it looks good on the outside, and it does. Stick a little pin right here to hold it, and I'm just going to get a needle and thread and whip stitch this to the little facing seam allowances. Sorry, not facing, the seam. Whip stitch the facing to the seam allowances underneath it. I'm going to do that to this side too, and then I'm going to call it a night, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, so welcome to the next morning here. I need to get started working on my sleeve, and I'm doing the sleeve option that has the little ties and the little loop carriers and everything on it, so lots to do. But I think that what I'm actually going to do is, before I start, you know, dealing with all of this, I'm going to serge around both of these pieces just because I don't want to deal with fraying, and this is going to get handled a whole lot. Before I take my pattern totally away, because I haven't marked it yet, I'm going to put a little letter B on the back side, and the back is the one that has 2 notches, the front has 1 notch. So just so I can keep track of it, the letter B there. I know you probably can't see it, but trust me, I can, okay? And 1 back here. Okay, so now that I have these serged around, you know, nice and protected here, I'm going to go ahead and punch out all of the circles and marks on this. So, you know, in addition to the normal 3 up here at the top, I've got a couple on each corner, and then I've got the ones for the little tie here, here, and here. So lots to punch out. I'm just going to mark it like usual with my pen, clipping my notches. Let me get that done and I'll be right back. Now I am going to be marking all of this on the right side of my fabric because, you know, I need to be able to see it all. But the dots up at the top, those go on the wrong side. So just letting you know, everything down here is the right side, everything up there is on the wrong side. And like before, because this is so busy and everything, I'm just going to connect the dots down here in my belt loops because it's a lot easier to see when there's a line down there. Connecting them, because like this dot here is already just about disappeared in that darkness there. So let me get this part done. All right, so with all of that marked, I'm going to work on this tie. They have you cut 1 piece here, and they want you to fold it in half, press that, and then fold each little end in, fold it in half and press it, okay? And once it's pressed like that, I'm going to put a little row of edge stitching on both sides so it's going to hold its place nice and flat. Okay, so now it says to cut this piece into 4 equal lengths, okay? Just to show you, that's what it looks like now, you know? Still using 2 different colored threads. I'm on pink and red now. My bobbin case, what's wrong with it is it's kind of deformed. It's an old machine. It's from the 1940s, and I think that it had gotten a little bit maybe stepped on or dropped something on it or something, so it's not quite a perfect circle. So when the bobbin spins, it's getting hung up a little bit. So, you know, nothing tragic, but just a little bit annoying. So, alrighty. Now it says to turn under the ends, 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to grab my little clips here, kind of eyeball it, you know, and put a clip on the end like that to all 4 of my little pieces, and get those settled right here, and then we're going to place those onto the sleeve. Okay, so we have 4 of these guys, 2 for each sleeve. So I'm just going to set a couple aside here, and I need to place these on these 2 center sections here, if you can see my little dots with the line through it there. Okay, so if I place my top one at the top and my bottom one at the bottom, it's actually a little bit long, but it looks like on the direction sheet, it does look like it's pooching out a little bit, so I guess that's correct. I don't know. I think that, well, you know what I'm going to do is just center my little carrier thing, figure out where that center is, put it about where the center of this is, and just stick a little pin in there to hold it until I get over to my machine. And then I'm going to run a little bit of a edge stitch across the very edge here at the top and bottom. I have just decided that I'm going to put it on flat, you know, instead of putting it on so it sticks out. I'm just going to put it on there flat. I think that that's going to work better for me, you know. My project, I can do what I want. Okay, so with my little belt loops on, you know, so there are a lot of these. You had to cut 8 of them out. So for each sleeve, you need 4 of these pieces. These are the little ties. And what you need to do is make them up. So you need to put 2 of them right side together. You're going to leave this end open, stitch it, you know, this way. They want you to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance on each side, you know, which is good. So let me go ahead and get these 4 sets made up. All right, so now that they are all stitched, I am just going to trim a lot of this excess up here, away down to like about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, you know, cutting it like that. Use my little lobster claw turner here, stick the rounded side in, and clip it closed, and then just pull it over here. Once I get these turned, I'm going to go ahead and press them flat and then edge stitch around the edge again so that they will just lay nice and flat. Okay, so once that has come through, I can just grab it and fluff it out like that. So yep, the edge stitching, it's going to be just like on the loops on both sides, you know, right along the edge. Okay, so I went down and had some lunch and other stuff for a while, and now I am back. So I've got my little straps here. You know what, I'm going to put them through my loops just to help hold them. And I'm going to line up my strap in between those 2 dots and make the cut edge the same as the cut edge of my sleeve. Let me get that pinned on right here. I'm going to do the same with the other side over here, and then I'm just going to stitch this on, you know, out on the outside edge, probably at about 1/4 or 3/8 inch seam allowance, just to hold it in place while I'm getting the rest of my sleeve put on. Okay, so those straps are secured. Oops, I got a thread there I need to clip off, but you know, just stitched over here. Those seam allowances are small enough they'll disappear. And it's time to go ahead and put the sleeves on the jacket. And I wanted to show you, I told you I was gonna whip stitch the facing to the seam allowances here at the shoulder seam, and I did. But while I was working on that, I went ahead and just did this entire back section. It didn't take much longer, and you know, I think it's invisible from this side, and I think that's going to hold it down a lot better. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and open this up. So I have one of these armhole areas open here. Okay. And they don't tell you to put basting stitches or gathering stitches or anything up here between those dots. So I guess we don't need to worry about it. So this is the front. It's got the little overflap here. Raise you up. And this is the back. So I need to find a sleeve that's going to match that. This has the letter B over here, so that's the wrong sleeve. So let me grab the other one. So I'm going to grab this sleeve, and if I lay it down here, yes, this is my back, so we're good. So now I need to start pinning them together. So there's a top center dot on the sleeve here. I'm just going to stick a pin through that. That goes so it matches up with the shoulder seam. So I'm going to stick my pin in the shoulder seam about 5/8 of an inch from the edge here so that the cut edges are all lined up. And I'm going to be putting 2 pins on here, one on each side of that shoulder seam, because I want to make sure that those seam allowances stay open and nice and flat when I'm stitching them. Okay? Then the next little dot here on my sleeve, I'm going to stick my pin through there, and that lines up right here on this sleeve, lining up so that the edges are nice and flat. Now you can see that it's going to look like there's extra here. It's not so much where the stitching line is as just in the seam allowance. And if I feel like this, you can tell that at the stitching line, at 5/8 of an inch in, there isn't any extra. So that's all good. I'm just going to put a pin halfway there. The next dot is way down here at the bottom corner. You know, that's just matching up the corner edges is going to make that dot match up too. And then if there is any ease here, do the thing I usually do. Let me turn it this way, where I fold it in half so that the bigger side is on the outside. Okay, and I'm gonna make sure my cut edges are all even. Stick a pin there. Okay, and then as I stitch it, let the feed dogs work it in, you know, but really it's fitting pretty exactly there, so I'm not too worried about that. So let me go ahead and pin the other side. What we're going to need to do once I have it all pinned together, let's see here, is, you know, pretend this is pinned over here already. Sew this seam at 5/8 of an inch the entire way. Then they want you to come back and sew it the entire thing again 1/8 of an inch in, so at half a seam allowance. So you're going to end up with 2 rows of stitching all the way, holding on your sleeve, one at 5/8 and one at 1/2 inch. Okay, so this is what she looks like right now. Hope you can see. You don't see my funky slippers. I think it's kind of cute. I just have it kind of clipped together here under the arm and everything because I still need to do a lot more work. But I just wanted to give you the overall effect at this point. I think it's cute. I think that stylistically the back is very straight, very plain and everything. And the front has this little overlap area. I think if I was to do this again and do anything differently, I might create a little overlap area for the back too. That kind of makes one of those traditional little extra shapes. And I think sometimes they would have the top out of like a mesh so it's breathable up here. Start the fabric at this point and then have the overlap, but that's a whole lot more work for another day. But I just wanted to let you see. I think that she's fun. I really love the fun colors. So yeah, next is going to be working on the side seams, but I am doing both the side seam pockets and the patch pockets on the front because you can't have too many pockets in a coat. So let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another day. I'm going to skip ahead in their instructions and go ahead and put my patch pocket on. I think they have it listed last in their instructions, but to me, I think it'll be easier to put them on with my front panels separate. So, as you can see, I have already serged around the edges, okay? And on the pocket pattern, there's a fold line. This fold line is 1.25 inches down, so I just used my ruler, measured it down, drew it over with my heat erasable pen. I'm going to go over to my iron and press it at that fold line on both of the pockets. Once that is done, I actually am going to turn up this bottom edge too, like so, all right? And then after it is turned up on the very bottom, pressed here, I need to stitch actually all the way around. And I believe it is at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. They don't really say, they don't give you dots, but since they don't say otherwise, I'm going to assume it's at 5/8 of an inch. All right, so now that is done, I need to trim this side, the folded side of the front seam allowance. I'm going to do it to like a fat 1/8 of an inch. And then the pocket part about halfway up here. Okay, so this is folded 1/4 inch. This slice is at that center point of that 1/4 inch. And then take it up, all right? So it looks like that. And I need to do that on both of these sides. So now that is done, what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn my pocket top. And I need to press it. Now they're going to have us press these corners in a special way down here. What they want you to do is you have like this thread line marking where your stitching line or your fold line should be, okay? This corner needs to come up beyond that stitching line. If I fold it so that this corner line here is at my fold line, I think that that will work. And then fold up this side and this side. And while I'm over at the ironing board pressing everything, I'm going to be pressing it like that, which should give me a nice little mitered corner. All right, over here at my ironing board, I just want to show you something I'm doing. Yeah, it's not in the instructions, but it's me. Stitch Witchery, you know, my favorite friend, just ripping off a little piece. And I've got my little mitered corner clipped together here. I'm just going to stick a little piece of Stitch Witchery underneath all of this. Carefully fold it where I need it to be and press it, okay? And that's just going to let the Stitch Witchery kind of hold that mitered corner temporarily in place. Sorry about the steam there. So that when I put it on and I'm stitching around the outside, I can be sure that these corners are going to behave themselves. And up here at the top, I'm going to be stitching straight across here on my next move, and my fabric is actually pretty well behaved, but if it wasn't, I would probably be putting some Stitch Witchery underneath this little flap to hold it still too, just because it makes me happy to do it. But I just wanted to show you that. It makes the corners much more well behaved. Okay, so I actually have marked the pocket placement dots on the wrong side, and I need those transferred over to the right side. So I'm just sticking some straight pins through them, and I'm going to draw where those little pins come through here, draw a line to connect them, and then that's going to tell me where to put my pocket. All right, I don't know if you can see because it's a very busy print, but there's a line I drew right here. Okay, and that is the line between those two dots, which is going to be the top of my pocket. And so I'm just going to pin it in place very carefully and then come back with my machine and edge stitch it, you know, reinforce up here, come down around and reinforce up here on both sides. All right, so with my patch pockets sewn on here, print's crazy busy. Before I can sew up my side seam, I need to get my pockets ready to set in. So first thing I'm going to do is just serge all the way around all 4 of these pocket pieces. Okay, so now I need to get my pockets placed, and I wanted to show you, I punched the wrong dot. There's so many dots down this row. The ones you need for your pocket placement, if you line up the notch right here, you can see that it is the dots in this row here and this row. I marked that one by accident, so I'm going to cross that out and remark this one, which is the one that right next to it, it says View AB. That's the one that's the upper dot for the pocket. So let me make sure that I have on all of my pockets here. I've got these 2 dots marked and my little notch marked, and make sure I've got my bottom one, but I need to transfer over my corrected top dot on both fronts and both backs. Okay, so I'm just going to show this once, and what I do here, you're going to do for all 4 pockets. So I need to first find the pocket that's going to go right sides together on my fabric. This is up, this is down. I have a dot here and a dot here. You're going to want to make your dots on the right side of your fabric. I know that's hard to see. It's hard for me to see, you know. On the pocket, you put them on the wrong side of your fabric. So I'm going to stick a little pin through the top dot, put it into this one here, so I can make sure that that is lined up well, and go ahead and cinch it in. And there is a notch. Where'd that notch go? Well, there's a notch right here. I don't see it right now, but that is also a point that can be lined up. So once you have all of your pockets pinned on like this with the raw edges together, you're going to sew all the way down this side, but only at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, a smaller seam allowance, okay? All right, so once you get your pockets sewn on, okay, what you're going to do is fold the pocket over the seam allowance so it's sticking out like this, and then do some understitching on the pocket all the way through the seam allowance here, and that's going to hold the pocket nice and flat towards the outside. But make sure the seam allowance for the jacket part is sticking out flat, okay? So you need to do that for all 4 pockets. Okay, so now it's time to get the side seams put in. So on this one, I've already actually matched it up. The seam allowances up here, this is my sleeve, that's my bodice. They go towards the sleeve, both of them, like this, okay? So just matching it up this way. Now when you get down to the pocket, the way that you're going to sew this is at 5/8 of an inch, you're going to come straight down to this first dot, okay? Let me bring you in a bit closer here. Okay, so you're going to come straight down at 5/8 of an inch to this top dot here. Then you're going to pivot and come into the pocket. Make sure that the seam allowances are both going towards the pocket, okay? And you're going to go over all of that, go all the way around it. Once you're at this point, you're going to come back up and you're aiming for this dot over here, okay? So you're going to come over it. Again, make sure both seam allowances stay going towards the pocket. Up to this dot. Once you're at this dot, you pivot and you're going to go straight down. Now you're going to be crossing the stitching line that we made to sew the pocket on. If you can see, here's that stitching line, okay, with its understitching. We're going to go past it. And going past it over here, all right? That's very important. And then after you make this turn, just go all the way down to the bottom. All right, so now that I have my side seam done, I need to press my seam allowances. This is the very bottom. Here's my pocket. So with the exception of the pocket area, I want all of my seams to be pressed open. So I'm just going to press it open up to this pocket here. And then just below the pocket, I'm going to clip the back seam allowance up to about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line. Don't want to cut it all the way up to it. And then also up on top of the pocket here. Okay, you cannot see that. Sorry about it. Okay, I clipped just above the pocket up to about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam line also. So I've pressed it open up to here. This entire pocket is going towards the front. Okay, so then I'm going to press that pocket area towards the front. Let it stay nice and flat there. And then just above the pocket, because I clipped that seam allowance, I'm going to open it up and press it open the rest of the way. When I get to my sleeve, I'm just going to stick a sleeve roll inside the sleeve so I can continue to press this seam allowance open too. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. I need to make the little belt carrier for my big tie belt. So again, there's one piece here, and just like the ones on the sleeves, you fold it in half, press that, and then turn in each side. Come on. Like so, and then press it so that you end up with a little thin area like that. And once I have it all pressed, I'll just edge stitch it down both sides. Alrighty, so here's my, what do they call it, a carrier, a side carrier, because it carries the belt, you know. So I'm going to fold it in half. And just like the ones on the cuff, they want you to turn it under about 3/8 of an inch on each side and stitch it in place. Just top stitching over the edge here. The belt loop goes just a little bit higher than that side pocket. And I don't know if I transferred the mark for this to the outside. I know I have it on the inside. But I can see right here is where the pocket opening is, okay? And I want my belt to be above where this pocket is, because, you know, that would be disastrous if it wasn't. And so I'm going to put the bottom of my belt loop right here, grab it, and it goes right on top of that seam line. So let me open this up here. So I'm going to put the bottom of it right about here, the top up here. I'm just going to measure from this opening here, okay, up 1 inch is going to take me above this pocket, all right? So if I take this little clamp off, that's about it. So I'm just going to stitch it on the bottom and on the top on this side seam here, and that's going to put it a couple inches below this little flap area, but above the pockets on this side. Alrighty, so I got my little belt loops on here, looking lovely. So now I need to make the belt. So there are several of these. Do we have 4? Yes, I have 4 of these pieces cut out. And for the tie belt, what I need to do is sew the 2 ends together. You know, there's a pointy end down here, flat end here. I need 2 sets. I need to sew this at 5/8 of an inch and here, and press those seam allowances open so I have 2 very long strips with pointy edges on each side. Okay, so here is the seam on this one, and I'm going to put my 2 long strips right side together, matching up that center seam like so. And when I stitch them together, I'm going to leave an opening straddling this center seam, probably a couple inches on each side of it. So like starting here at 5/8 of an inch, going all the way to the tip, and then come back down all the way around that side and then back, and stopping right here. And that should give me enough room to be able to turn the ends pretty easily. I was just about to run over to my machine, and I just saw in the instructions they want you to do it at 3/8 of an inch, not 5/8 of an inch. I'm not too sure that it makes that much of a difference, but that is what we will do. Okay, so I've got it all sewed, and I am going to be flipping this right side out with lobster claw and edge stitching it just like I did these little ties on the sleeves, so you don't need to see that twice. I'm just going to do it exactly the same way, cutting out the bulk where I need to, flipping it, pressing it, and edge stitching it. And when I edge stitch it, that's going to close up the opening that I left here in the middle. Alrighty, so here is my belt in its loop, looking lovely. We just need to get this hemmed. So the sleeves call for a 1.25 inch hem. So I'm just going to bring this inside out here. So I need to fold this up 1.25 inch, and hopefully it will lay nice and flat. That's my goal here. Okay, let's see here. I'm just going to measure and mark this point down here at the side seam. Put a little clip on that fold and do the same thing up here at the top. I should get a smaller ruler over here. Okay. And put a clip up here at the top. So what I'm going to do before I actually stitch it is I'm going to go over to my ironing board, press this nice and flat, and then turn under this raw edge. They say to turn it under 1/4 inch and press that. Pin it down, and then we're just going to make a edge stitch along this edge here of that fold just to anchor it down all the way around. Okay, so I've got my sleeves hemmed up. This is another day, just letting you know, by the way. I got those hemmed up. I just made a little tie here, and I tried it on really quickly, spoiler here. And these ties are pretty tall. They're like right about here. They're not right next to your hand, they're up higher. So, you know, just letting you know, if that's gonna bother you, you might wanna put them a little bit lower, but you know, it doesn't bother me. So I'm gonna hem up the bottom now. And I've decided I'm going to do a 2-inch hem because when I tried it on, it actually came slightly lower than I was thinking it was going to. So I have my facing folded, you know, back, wrong side out, obviously. And down here at the bottom, I've drawn a line at 2 inches from the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch that line on both sides of the facing of my bottom hem. Alright, so here it is, stitched along that line. What I am going to do is come inside here, and I'm cutting the facing up at about 5/8 inch. This part, I'm going to come in about 1 inch or so, and then cut it up to the same approximately. These scissors are not acting well. 5/8 inch, okay? So let me also trim off some of the bulk of this corner here. Now if I flip this whole thing right side out, and I will get my little corner poked out here in a second. Actually, let me grab my little knitting needle here. All right, so with my corner poked out, this is going to give me a nice place to start my hem right here. So I can go ahead and press that, all right? And then this is also up at the 2-inch point now. So I can just continue to press this all the way across. And when I go to stitch it, I'm going to also do like a little whip stitch right here to catch this piece up against here. But first thing first, I need to go ahead and turn and press out the bottom corners on both sides, and then press up my hem 2 inches all the way across. All right, so I've got it all pressed. What I'm going to be doing is just turning under this serged edge here about 1/4 inch, and then putting a straight edge stitch along here, just like I did for the sleeves. Let me grab one of these sleeves. Okay, so you can see it's just edge stitched there, you know, very easy. I want to point out one thing here, and I'll probably mention it up in my wrap up. This is a very straight coat. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, I was kind of following along here, and I forgot to leave the sides open because I was trying to figure out, there's no vent in the back of this. This is a very, very straight coat. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I am going to go back right now before I have my hem sewed here and open up my side seam, because this comes right about at my knee. And so honestly, I want to have a vent opening about this far so that I have a little bit more flexibility, because her coat is longer, Mine's like right about here. So I'm going to need about an 8-inch opening. I'm so glad I looked at this. I should have paid more attention. Let me look at the instructions here. Aha, okay, so they have the opening going all the way up to just below the pockets. Good to know, good to know. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and measure up from my hemmed bottom here. If this is my pocket, and I'm sure there's a dot right below the pocket right here that I have now ironed over and is gone, but from the diagram, that's what it looks like. Okay, if on my ruler, this is 8 inches, just, you know, it's my jacket, I can pick how high I want it open, so that's what I'm going to be choosing. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark right here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and grab my little blade here and get this picked open really quick up to that point. Okay, so I've got it picked open. What I'm going to do is just turn, I have this pressed open at 5/8 right now, okay? I'm just going to turn that raw edge under here, press that and do an edge stitch, you know, along this whole open edge. Pretend this is not folded, okay? All the way up and down, so I have a tiny little 1/4 inch hem on each side of the slit. So when I come up to the top, I'll just take my stitching straight across here and then come back down. And up here at the top, if I want to back stitch over it once or twice, that might really help to reinforce so this doesn't want to go whoop and open up the rest of the way. Okay, so now I have my little opening here finished off. So I'm going to go back and work on my hem. So I have it pressed. What I'm going to do is turn the edge under and with the machine stitch across the top. Okay, so I am just about done doing the final little stitching to make everything nice and secure here. So if, you know, that's going to hold itself, it's pretty much invisible there. This is my little edges, you know, they're all cinched together. I think that's going to be fine. So let me pop it on the dress form and we'll see what she looks like. Okay, so here we go. It's a cute little jacket, very lightweight, you know. I think the pattern itself did not have buttons or buttonholes on it. It overlaps plenty. If you wanted to put buttons or buttonholes, I think it'd be fine. I'm glad that I used a size larger than I normally use for blouses and things like that. I think it just makes it a little more comfy. I'm also glad I made the arms bigger because sorry, it's my cat. I have plenty of room because I made the arms bigger. If I hadn't done that, I don't think that I would. And you want to be able to put this on over other garments. So, you know, there you go. It's fun. I like the colors. I think I mentioned a couple other, you know, basic trench coat looking jackets that are in the khaki brown kind of look, but I think that this is fun. And it is easy. There's nothing on this pattern that's like an advanced concept. It's mostly straight stitches. easy interfacing. So yeah, I think it's very doable. If you made it out of a heavier fabric, a thick wool, or something that was a little more insulated than my little polyester here, you could probably use it for warmth too. As it is, this is going to be like a spring jacket, a warm days but with a light breeze kind of jacket. Definitely not early January kind of jacket, because wow, it's chilly out there. So anyhow, hope you liked it, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.
Living my bucolic life, every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.